Three. Greetings, Shannon. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Colin. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thank you. Getting to talk to you from my home in Oregon. Where are you today?
I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of DC. And I'm here with a couple of young boys who are a little pent up with their energy. So apologies in advance for any interruptions.
So you're actually facing the exact same circumstances the rest of us are and having to work from home and being responsible and social isolating?
Exactly. And I have been enjoying the ability to work from home and doing all of these video calls and seeing everybody's faces. But it's usually right when I'm about to make a really great point that one of them will jump in and ask for chocolate milk. We'll see
Excellent.
what happens.
Duly noted. And maybe it'd be fun to see that side of things if it happens. So we'll see how it
Fun
goes.
for you, not for me, but
Okay.
that works.
For anyone that's looking in, Shannon McGahn is the Senior Vice President for the National Association of Realtors and is our Chief Lobbyist, if you will, in Washington, D.C. And you've been in that role for over a year and a half now. For most of us, and understanding not everyone watching this video will fully understand what NAR does yet, but lobbyist for a lot of people is considered a dirty word. Why is that not the case for the National Association of Realtors, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, we like to say advocacy instead of lobbying of these days. And so the term lobbyist is actually a kind of a funny one. It was developed many years ago before the age of cell phones and people just being able to connect on a daily basis. And you would see people do what I do, waiting in the lobby of a hotel for a member of Congress to come out from their steak and bourbon dinner and then, hey, I've got an idea for you, or let me ask you a few questions. And so the term lobbyist was from hanging out in the lobby. That's not exactly how it's done anymore. I'm not going to say it's never done that way, but that's not exactly how it's done. So we generally use the term advocacy and advocates because our job is to advocate on behalf of our 1.4 million members and to ensure anytime there is a federal law or policy or regulation going through, that you have a voice there for you in Washington.
So you have a lot of competition. There's a lot of people trying to do exactly what you're doing, and the ears of the politicians are tough to get a hold of. Why is it that the National Association of Realtors is considered so effective at what they do when there's tons of others that have more money than we do and pay accordingly? Why are we so effective?
Sure. So, we tend to mention that 1.4 million member quite a bit. And while the quantity of our membership does matter, it's also the quality of who our members are and the work that we present in front of members of Congress. So the three words of why we really matter more than many other associations, or why I think we're heard more than other associations, are vote, act, and invest, because we are very involved on all three levels, and not just that we're out there voting. We can always have more folks voting, but we're actually involved in the policy making. And I was very pleasantly surprised when joining over a year ago and going to Boston for an annual meeting and the very first round of policy meetings to see what policy wonks we have in our leadership of NAR, and how it's just incredibly impressive that we can go and testify in front of Congress on any issue that's touching housing under the sun, and do so in a way that's forceful and that gets results. So we're kind of a triple threat in that area, and we want to make sure that we're maintaining that, even if that means virtually. We're still, because of this amazing technology, able to communicate with policymakers. We've had calls with Secretary Carson over the Housing and Urban Development, and doing calls with key members of Congress on these issues. And I think their schedules have been freed up a little bit, and you're not running back and forth from votes and committee hearings and markups. And so we're definitely doing a great deal of communicating.
Wonderful. You mentioned the phrase triple threat, and I've heard that mentioned in various different industries. I know in the entertainment industry, I believe it's somebody that can act, that can sing, and that can dance. And so
I can do none of those things, but
nor can I.
But vote, act, and invest. Those are also they also
right, another. There you go. The staff that you're working with are hugely important and are ever present in Washington, D.C. and constantly communicating with their legislators. But I know for a fact that Vince Malta and several of our leadership have consistently testified in Congress as volunteers, as our soldiers in the field, if you will. What does it look like for somebody like Vince Malta to testify? What kind of questions does he get asked, and what does he talk about?
Oh, one of the best things that we can do is when we're talking to committee staff. And I used to be a committee staffer. I was staff director at the House Financial Services Committee for many years. And so I was on the other side of the dais and looking out at the witness table and who's testifying. And I always thought, I would never want to be that person. You're just getting pummeled with questions from dozens of members of Congress. And sometimes they'll be nice and tip you off as to what's coming up, and sometimes they won't. And there can be questions where you're playing up for the cameras and you've got photographers in your face. And then to work for an organization where we have members who are volunteering to do that, raising their hand saying, please, I would love to testify and I would love to share my expertise from a practical perspective on how these policies are impacting our industry, which represents nearly a fifth of the entire GDP. So yes, President Vince Malta has been one of the go-tos for testifying. We've had several others within just the last year testifying on everything from tax issues to mortgage finance and environmental issues. And I think that brings us that extra level of clout when other organizations can say, hey, in a meeting, here's what we would like to do, but we provide members who have that direct responsibility to their agents and to their consumers and to homeowners, and they can come and testify and say, this is how this is going to impact the industry, and we are consistently sought out for that as well.
Wonderful, and we'll get back to some of those points you just made a little later on, but I want to move on to where we're at today. These are unprecedented times, and 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, none of us could have really anticipated life would look as it does today. I think realtors in general, I certainly believe this, that as a realtor, I do my best work when things get hard. In other words, we have the solutions. We've been down this road before. We can work the problem. Things came at you very, very quickly when this started to go down this road. We just on the 27th of March, had the president sign the third tranche of, and the largest, the $2.2 trillion stimulus package. For the first time ever, realtors had a place in that package that acknowledged us as a fundamental part of the economy. We contribute to the economy. We don't get to draw unemployment typically because of how our independent contractor piece does. How much work was that to get the legislators to recognize us in that capacity, and how hard did NAR work on our behalf to do that? What does it look like from your perspective?
Sure. So as this was all unfolding over the past few weeks, there's the day-to-day side of it where you're used to being on Capitol Hill and attending meetings and going to events and having that face-to-face contact and knowing how these things are unraveling in real time. And then you go into a closing down the office, and we've had 350 employees of the National Association of Realtors have all been working seamlessly remotely. I think we're working more hours than usual and different hours because of time zone changes, and sometimes the kids are popping in, but it has been the level of collaboration and communication that has occurred through this virtual existence has been just absolutely just fascinating. But to do that with Capitol Hill, when the oddest part was when they started closing down the actual House and Senate office buildings. Yep. And you could go in if you had an official appointment, but then not really. So we were doing a lot of the old-fashioned, let's put this in a letter, let's do phone calls, let's do phone briefings, and let's make sure that we're getting the right data, the right research, and information in front of them as they are crafting this policy. And we were always looking about 2 bills ahead. So there have been 3 different federal responses so far on the legislative side. The first one was that roughly $8.5 billion on medical research. That was the very first response. The second one was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and that included the medical services, testing, FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, other paid leave, and some unemployment insurance assistance to the states. So during that piece of legislation, where we knew that that was going to be focused mostly on FMLA and the paid leave, but we were in front of members of Congress explaining that when you're looking at the economy and you're looking at who has access to unemployment, who has access to small business loans or any of these other financial protections you're putting out there, please don't ignore half the wage earners who are 1099 and not W-2. You would think it's a no-brainer that you're going to look at everybody within the economy and all people who are working. Turns out it was a bit of a brainer because we did get some pushback, and we did have a couple of instances where we thought that maybe there was going to be some programs that were not applicable to members who are self-employed or independent contractors. So those conversations were going nights and weekends and direct contact with policymakers and the key staffers who are writing the legislation to ensure they know that we have members who make an average of under $40,000 a year, who are 1099, who don't have access to these benefits normally. Where are they going to stand when it comes to the financial response? So that was it was very touch and go. We had all of our arguments ready, but we were confident throughout that it was going to be included. But the devil's in the details. And as soon as the CARES Act came out, that legislative text came out late in the day. We have an amazing policy team led by Joe Venturone. I say the lobbyists, if you will, are the ones who are there for when the sausage is made. But you don't want us inspecting the sausage. You want to make sure that you have other folks who are smart, very smart lawyers who are looking at making sure that the things that we converse and that we wrote about, that we were told were in there, that the legislative text matches what our members are doing. And so they have been pouring through that text and have put together a fantastic FAQ document that's at nar.realtor/coronavirus. You'll see all of our advocacy efforts. We're very transparent with it, everything, all of our letters and issues we're working on there. To ensure that we have those questions answered as to what benefits are applicable to our members. And the good news is our number one priority going in was making sure that our members, as those who are earning for their family and taking care of their families' physical health and financial health during this time, that they're included in there, and we were able to get them in that package.
Excellent. And I'll make sure that a copy of that link is available to anybody watching this video on the link that it's on. I was 7 years a realtor before I even understood that I had a separate association and a separate MLS. And heaven forbid you even talk to me about RPAC. I was just like, I got houses to sell.
You caught up.
I really did. I was like completely oblivious. And I bring that up because so many of our members are like that. And I mean no disrespect when I say that. They're busy selling houses.
Right.
Some of us really enjoy this part of things. But when we talk to our members and we say advocacy plays such a large role, this really clearly demonstrates in a very big time of need how effective we can be as a body and the voice that we have on Capitol Hill to be able to reach those legislators and help them understand the difference between a 1099 employee and a W-2 or 1099 independent contractor and a W-2 employee is absolutely huge. Where do you see next steps? You said you're always looking 2 bills ahead. We're already seeing discussions of a fourth stimulus package. Maybe it includes infrastructure, maybe it doesn't. What are you paying attention to, and what could that look like?
Sure. So yes, right now there's a great deal of attention on what this phase 4 package could look like. So Speaker Pelosi earlier today did a telephone press conference in which she outlined what the House Democratic priorities would be. These are conversations that we've already had with congressional Democrats weeks ago as to where are potential policy changes that could be included in one of these rounds. So the idea behind the third round, the CARES Act, was to have direct financial assistance that went out to as many Americans as possible. So that's where you're seeing things like those direct financial payments at Treasury, is sending to all taxpayers, including those who are not W-2. That was another argument we had to have. They have $1,200 and then $500 per kid. I don't think any of yours qualify. Sorry, Colin, but that's direct money that will be going into many checking accounts in a matter of weeks. So you're seeing you're seeing the SBA loan program that includes the Paycheck Protection Program, so that you have independent contractors and commission-based earners who are still able to go and get these SBA loans through their local lending institution. That sample form just came out yesterday, and pleased that it is a whopping 1.5 pages, not counting the instructions, which are a few pages, but it's designed to be simple. It's designed to take out the bureaucratic barriers so that these can be processed quickly. So you're also seeing other emergency loans that convert into grants, that they're forgivable. So these are things that are going to be of great help to our members in all sizes. And so we're also looking at the brokerages too, who want to be able to continue to make payroll. Part of this package, a huge part of this package, was ensuring that people don't have to be laid off, or if they are, that they are quickly hired again and that mortgages can be paid, interest can be paid, rent can be paid, utilities can be paid with these loans. So we have all that information on our website as well. So looking at that next package, we had some policy changes. One of the big ones being access to remote online notary. That wasn't in the scope of this one. The CARES Act was more financial, direct financial support and access to loans and grants. They weren't looking into policy changes. That gets into a whole nother field of committee activity. So we're having those conversations about if remote online notary could be included in step 4, but also we don't look just at what the federal response could be. We have state and local associations who are amazingly active and knowledgeable about how these are going to impact their own members. So 23 states right now have remote online notary. We've been working with the states that don't have it to see, is there an executive order that could happen? Or is a legislature working on a similar bill that might have some other benefits there where this could be included? We also are working independent of this package. So we had 2 House members, a bipartisan group of members, drop a separate standalone bill on remote online notary to make it a federal permanent law. So that can move on its own track and pick up co-sponsors, and we can show support that way. So we don't just look at one avenue, we're looking at everything that's available to us. Our federal regulatory team with Joe Ventrone has been in touch with the administration. FHFA is easing some of their restrictions on appraisals and notaries. And so these are all things that are going to be helpful going forward. But for phase 4, we have a very lengthy list of things that we know could lead the recovery. What is the question is phase 4 going to be more of a response, or is it going to be more of a recovery effort? And I think we'll know over the next couple of weeks what direction it can go. And it might end up being an expansion of what CARES has done or a continuation. The conversations on the Hill have been very reassuring. The president has talked about this being an infrastructure-based bill because of the low interest rates and the ability to pump a couple $1 trillion is what he's mentioned. Speaker Pelosi also has interest in making it an infrastructure-based bill, and she specifically mentioned broadband access, which is something we care about and we have communicated to the Hill. And then she's also looking at ways of looking at community health centers and other education and housing programs. So part of this exercise has also been to see what existing programs are out there that our members are working with or care about that can be expanded or that can be funded in a fuller fashion, so that it's not about creating a new system or a new program. That's a barrier that's a little more difficult to get to.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. And I know that a lot of realtors and broker owners are following as much as possible the CARES Act and how they may qualify for the grants and the SBA loans that might be available. And I heard some interesting discussions on some of the news outlets last night about some companies saying, we don't need it at this point. But ultimately, this is an emergency package. And if you qualify for it, you should be looking at it because maybe you don't need it today, but you might need it in 6 months and it may not be available. So to really think carefully before you choose not to apply for something like that. Infrastructure, interestingly, very close to our hearts here in Oregon, mainly because Peter DeFazio is our congressman, and that's a big piece for him. And he certainly would love to see Congress come through with a piece of legislation. Do you think that maybe part of the reason why they're not quite sure yet whether this will be a recovery package or a continuation of CARES is because we don't know how long this is going to last? And so a recovery would be when we can kind of see it in the rearview mirror a little bit more, as opposed to it's still in our mirror and we need to continue to care. Is that kind of what's going on right now?
Exactly right. And I think that we want to be prepared either way. I mean, there could be a package 5 and 6, and this could be going on for a while. But I especially want to emphasize the great point that you made that these are programs that are accessible and available. And even if they're not something that you're sure if you need right now, we're expecting for real estate to help bring the economy back. We have record low interest rates right now. We're looking at all types of different forbearance measures and things to help people get through this very difficult time. But at the end of the day, this is a very healthy economy that is dealing with a very deadly and serious virus. We're going to kill this virus, and it's a matter of when, not a matter of if, but if that takes weeks, if that takes months, and just seeing how these private corporations have come out and the testing that's becoming available, and the FDA allowing for more types of research to be developed and trials. I mean, this is we're hoping it's a matter of weeks and not months. But either way, I think that this is something where real estate is going to be an area that can come back very strongly and will help to deliver the economic boom that we're going to see when this is over.
And I know that there's 1.4 million realtors ready to go back to work and ready to be a part of that boom. So one thing we talked about earlier, to kind of bring it back a little bit on the more human side, I mentioned how, lobbyists don't always have a great name. And obviously, we're tremendously proud of the work that you do with the National Association of Realtors. And we feel really good about the work being done in general, because our cause is something that benefits the entire real estate community and all of our clients. And so the American dream is something we've tried to protect. And that tends to be a much more bipartisan issue than a lot of the other issues that are out there. So it's more of a feel-good industry, I would hope, to represent. That said, we agree and disagree all the time with each other about the politicians we support and whether we like and what we don't like what they have to say. But at the end of the day, they're human beings too. They're going back to the Hill and they're making some tough decisions. What's the general feeling amongst them right now? How are they feeling?
Yeah, sure. Well, for all of the talk about a broken Washington and how partisan everything is, look how quickly Washington came together and supported unanimously the largest piece of legislation in our history. That's not something that happens easily. That happens when people are willing to put those barriers down and put what's good for our country and what's good for all Americans first. And I think that's what you saw here. 96-0, the vote in the United States Senate. And it passed under unanimous consent in the United States House. That's incredibly impressive. And we're hearing that same kind of bipartisanship and action in our conversations as well. It's getting a little more partisan now that you're looking at the phase 4 and whether or not there's certain priorities that could be considered to be a Democratic or a Republican priority. And I think that that's normal. And a lot of that is, there's media coverage and they're going to talk about it. But you're also seeing an administration where my former boss, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, is leading these negotiations with a Democratic Speaker of the House, and they're going well. And so I've been very fortunate in my career to see these negotiations up front and know how they work behind closed doors, and it's not as terrible as you would think. That typically these are people who want what's best for Americans. They want to kill this virus and they want the economy to bounce back, and they're going to work towards it. The sniping will continue and that'll happen, but I think that we will see a phase 4 that is going to have a lot more of that camaraderie continue.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of commentary, both sides of the aisle, in terms of news commentary about how well Steve Mnuchin has grown into that role and how much he has evolved from day one to where he is to be such a serious negotiator with, I don't think anyone would have seen the Democrats negotiate. And all things considered, I'm neither side. I'm totally observing on this. But he's been very effective, and he's really helped move the ball. And I think what a lot of us need to understand is when we see this public bickering and the news coverage and the partisanship, that's also part of a healthy democracy. It's both sides lobbying for what they believe in and on their constituents' behalf, their clients' behalf, or not their clients, but their constituents. But that's normal. So you see this every day. What would you say to people that get so caught up in the partisanship part of it, and that's all that they see is my side or their side? But isn't that a functioning democracy? Isn't that really what we were intended to be doing? It may not be comfortable, but isn't that it?
Exactly. So I guess, again, because I've just been part of this for decades now, and I always joke that when I am out making friends, that the thing that bothers me the most is not somebody who argues with me. It's somebody who won't. It's somebody who doesn't have an opinion and isn't willing to go and stick up for that opinion. And so you see this, I think it's amplified so much more because we have our computers in front of us and our phones and the television on, and then there's always this coverage of it. But again, behind closed doors, it's usually not that much bickering. There's a lot more deal making, and there's a lot more of that camaraderie, and there's a lot more friendship that is not always seen. I was recently at an event with a former member of Congress who was singing a song that he wrote about another member of Congress who recently passed away, who was on the other side of the aisle, and said, I had no idea that I was going to make a friend like this, but here's a song that I wrote in his honor. Like, these things are what we see up front every day as the lobbying team who works with and on the Hill. But our job is to communicate that to you all so that you get to see that we're there for making history. We're there for ensuring that our members' needs are being met through federal policy, and it's not as bad as what you see on television.
Well,
So
that's
stay.
really good to
So
hear.
stay.
Really good to hear. Because I can't imagine you would have done it for decades, and it doesn't look like you'd have done it for decades, and that's a compliment. But uh, I can't imagine you would do it if you weren't passionate about it, you didn't enjoy it, and that wasn't indeed the facts on the ground. Um, Shannon, I know you've got another conference call to be on, and I want to let you go, but I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today and help us understand what really goes on in Washington, D.C. on behalf of all of our realtors, our 1.4 million members. Thank you personally. I'm sure I'm thanking you on their behalf as well. And hopefully we get to chat to you in the next couple of weeks, see how things are progressing. But we wish you all the best working from home. And I'm sure you'll be as effective, if not more so, from there as you're so good at what you do. And stay safe and stay healthy out there.
Well, I thank you for this opportunity, Colin, and for everyone who's watching. Stay safe and stay healthy as well. And nar.realtor//coronavirus. That has all of these details and any of the FAQs that you need. And if there's anything else, please reach out to your advocacy team. We'd be happy to track down that information for you.
Fantastic. Again, I'll have that link up there. Thank you again so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Shannon. Take care.